Mm.
Good evening, Bill.
Good evening, Sandy. How are you?
I'm fine.
How's my lovely Scottish friend doing over there in, the old country?
Fine. It's actually very warm and has been a beautiful day, and that lifts everybody's spirits. So
Yes, the sun, especially how, rarely you guys get it.
and for the first time in 3 weeks, I went swimming.
Oh, how'd that feel? Did it feel good to get your body moving again?
It felt really good to be in the water, and I felt like I hadn't been swimming for 3 weeks. Anyway, that is not for now for us to discuss. Instead, we are going to be talking this evening about something that's in one way very close to me, but also just close to all of us, which is about learning.
Okay.
I've called it Student Teacher this evening. Conversation with Bill Wadman, that's you.
That's me.
And I have a question I want to start with for you.
Oh boy.
And remember last time I said to you about really slow down, don't just jump on it.
I'll
really,
do my best.
Yeah. What is learning, Bill?
Accepting and remembering information. I guess here's it's funny, there would be a very simple definition of this, but it makes me wonder whether learning is an active process. Like, do you have to actively learn, or does that just sort of happen?
I'm going to ask you to do something which I think is difficult for you.
Yeah.
Which is not to actually apply what somebody else has told you about learning and tell me what you think learning is.
I don't know that anybody's ever told me what learning is.
No, not expressly maybe, and that's not quite what I mean. What I mean is that you are using actually the collected information I think about, which you speak, to try and define what learning is, when I'm asking you to just give me almost like your gut instinct of what learning, like what's learning?
Accumulated knowledge. I think it's the process of exploring the world and growing from it.
A process. Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think in a different time in my life, I would think that learning was more of a concrete bricks on a wall kind of thing. But I think that it's more of like an accretion of dust over a long period of time. I think there's also the reason I balked at first is that I wonder sometimes if learning isn't does wisdom have to come along with knowledge for it to be learning? Is it enough to be an encyclopedia of stuff? I mean, you and I, a lot of times when we talk, we'll reference some artist or some period or some time or some dates. Is that really learned anything, or is that just?
Well, and this is what I spend most of my time doing, thinking about, is that, there's a branch of kind of education theory, pragmatism, where really we're thinking about experience as learning, not acquisition in quite the same way. So learning by rote, for example, most people would probably agree that in some sense that's been outmoded and is now outdated as a learning model, let's say. And that's a very dry way to talk about it. But do we offer alternatives, for example, in our learning structures and our kind of institutionalized learning in a school system? Are we learning, or are we just moving information around? Because I don't think that learning is just about information.
Yeah.
I wonder.
It's, I always go back to James Burke on these kinds of conversations because the man's a genius. And it seemed like he had a thing in the 70s where he would talk about how, knowing the dates and the names and all the rest of it is sort of an outmoded ideology in the age of information. It's like, if I need to know what year the Newcomen engine was invented, I can look it up.
Yeah.
It'll take me 10 seconds to look it up. Understanding processes and understanding change over time and understanding, shapes of things, larger, like zoom out kind of shapes of things, is much more useful, which is ultimately what you're trying to learn, right? You're trying to have knowledge that you can use in your life, right?
Hang on there. Does that mean that learning has to have an outcome that's prescribed before one starts?
No, but I think that it is inevitable in learning anything that then that is another voice in the Congress of your head when you're thinking about things, is like, oh, I learned about it from the philosophical angle. I learned about it from the art angle. I learned about it from the capitalist angle. And like all of these things are going to inform you and change the way that you process information and make decisions and go forward. And I think without you trying to do that, I don't mean that it has to have a prescribed answer, but I think it's inevitable that that knowledge ends up feeding the way your brain works.
What's the difference between knowledge and wisdom then to you?
I think knowledge is information, wisdom is knowing when to use the information.
Right.
I think that I have a fair knowledge of a lot of things. I think oftentimes I have more wisdom than I have knowledge. Just because I tend to think at a different, I tend to think zoomed out, which drives some people crazy. It's funny because it's a different way than you feel zoomed out, than you think zoomed out. We both think zoomed out, but we think zoomed out on different sides of the information.
To me, you always seem very information heavy.
Yeah.
And the happy accident of all of this is that you're also incredibly quick-witted. So I
can fake I can fake wisdom.
I didn't say that, but I know, as will you, I know a lot of people who are very smart and who have acquired lots of information and then become knowledgeable and authorities even on certain subjects.
Yep.
Yet they don't seem to have anything other than that knowledge.
Sure. Yeah, there's lots of people like that. I think I have a lot of information, but I don't think I'm quite over that cusp. But yeah, I know people like that. Where it's like, yeah, you're incredibly smart, incredibly knowledgeable, but you really have nothing to say about it.
No, what I mean is that, I could ask a direct question about, about education, for example. And
sure.
Someone very smart and very well read will speak to me, tell me, actually enabling me to learn, funnily enough, in some ways. But what they're doing is they're recalling. They're recalling something they know. And knowledge is that, isn't it? It's about recall, and it's rooted in memory. And things that are rooted in memory are already gone, as we've talked about now many times.
Yep.
But also they usually come from another source, not from this internal well source of
yeah, of course,
I can say wisdom.
Do you think anything actually, no, this is going to be bad because you're going to totally disagree with me, but do you really think that anything comes from the internal well source? Or do you think that we think things come from the internal well source when they're really coming from external information that we've digested?
I think most of the time we're operating in memory, and I think we've digested information that we regurgitate. I think for a lot of people, again, it tends to be actually very smart people. They are kind of trapped in a cycle of memory about what they know. And although they can apply it, and although they might be very articulate and able to problem solve even, so being very active with their knowledge, that still doesn't mean that they've had any kind of insight.
True. How many people actually have that much insight, though?
I've been very fortunate to meet quite a few people.
Well, you, whatever they think you believe is insight, somebody else might disagree with you, right? And think like, what they had to say is just a bunch of fluff or a bunch of regurgitation anyway.
But also then that comes down to whether one can share insight.
Like be able to communicate it at all, or certain people have better communication skills than others?
At all. I mean, this feeds into, again, the whole realm of stuff that you don't like talking about, which is to do with thinking that perhaps there is a universal stream in which my sorrow is your sorrow and your joy is my joy, and so on.
Yeah, I don't believe that.
Well, then our conversation's done, Bill. Goodbye, everybody.
Go ahead.
I mean, insight maybe is in that realm for me, where that sort of instantaneous and timeless being of awareness is suddenly just come up upon, and whether that can be shared. I'm really interested in this, and it links in with an idea of teaching and learning, actually, where anything that's prescriptive or anything that's planned tends not to result in insight.
Sure.
It gets result, but it gets a result within a paradigm of the expected.
Well, I think sometimes the plan can lead to insight when the plan fails.
Resolution and understanding are also maybe different to insight.
True. I mean, these definitions, I think, are Venn diagrams of each other in some ways.
Well, also language is tricksy, and
Sure.
definitions themselves take us into a world of
words themselves are a veil of confusion.
Yeah. Anyway, on the screen I've put a weave by Anni Albers, one of my favorite people maybe from art history. She was,
how big is this thing?
It's 180 by 2.6 or something. It's rug sized, I think. I might be wrong.
And what is it that you love about it?
It's not that I necessarily love this weave. What I love about Anni Albers is that when the Bauhaus was shut down by the Nazis in 1933, she and Josef came over, and they were then at Black Mountain College, as you know. And they championed being like a living embodiment of their work, in that it became it became the stuff of others learning. So there's something quite radical in the 20th century about taking people out of an institutionalized traditional model of learning, which would have been desks in a classroom or easels aligned in an art college. If you know, think about traditional art colleges or l'Accademia in Florence, for example, very rigid, very academic. Black Mountain College was a seat of revolution, really, in art education. And that's why so many kind of luminaries came from Black Mountain College, really. The freedom with which people were able to explore not what they must do, but what they could explore. Really, the entire process of learning is inquiry. And that inquiry is open. It's not closed from the outset. And I wonder, with any type of learning where we say to the student, or if I am the student, I'm told, you are learning to this, you will understand how to make that sum work. If you add 1 + 1, you will get 2. And if I'm told I'm getting to 2, then that's me done.
Yeah.
I hope I'm making sense.
I'm listening.
Whereas in inquiry, and especially in approaching art in a way that simply one does not instruct, one models maybe what can be done for process, for example, but the ideas surrounding the process are free floating and available to everybody to choose to pick up, put down, work with themselves. It was an enormously liberating time. Anyway, I mean, Anni Albers, also, I just want to mention, her husband Josef is far more famous than she, or has been. She has had a real kind of rebirth, actually, I think, in consciousness. She had a fantastic retrospective at Tate Modern a few years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, just before the pandemic. And there's a sense that here was a female artist working in the Bauhaus. I mean, there's a lovely photograph of her amongst Kandinsky and her husband Josef, all men, and her, one woman, and a weaver.
Yeah.
A weaver. And yet she was celebrated. The Bauhaus wanted to teach craft and process. It was very important. And whilst Josef was perfecting things like, interactions of color, which we'll come to in just a moment, she too was working on this sense that she was on her own journey. She was through or moving through her own inquiry. How many teachers do you know who actively pursue their own inquiry? Now, luckily, now we probably know a lot more teachers that do it that way. But for such a long time, there was a sense that the subject was closed, the result was in sight, and it was an end product that the learner was aiming for.
So go ahead, finish your thought.
No, with the Albers, both of them, they didn't do that. They didn't say to students, this is where you must end up. And
is there a goal to the inquiry, though?
No.
Or is the inquiry the process and the process is the goal?
Hang on, say that again.
Is the inquiry a process and the process is the goal?
I've kind of that's come up now for me a little bit, in that I don't like calling inquiry process.
Okay, why not? What is the difference?
Process is very directional.
Yeah, but if you don't know what direction it's going in, inquiry is going to be directional eventually. It's going to choose some direction. It can go in 360 degrees in a sphere in any direction, but it's going to go in one of those directions. It can change direction, but it's, you know what I mean? It's not like it's going in all directions at once. You're making inquiry decisions are implicit in the idea of inquiry. And those decisions are going to close certain doors and open others, right?
Do you think you were a good student, Bill?
I was a terrible student.
So was I. Irony is always.
I got terrible grades. Yeah, no, I at music school, I was a very good student, but I found it very easy. But like when I was in normal school, or when I went to engineering school for a couple of years, I was a terrible student. I didn't care. I get bored.
But
learning that way. But
do you think it's ever explained to us how to be students?
I think some people understand it naturally and some people don't. Like for some people, the way that things are taught in the Western world in the last few hundred years comes to them easily. And I'm going to be unkind for a minute, but I think a lot of those people tend to be followers, not leaders. They want to be told what to do. And I can't stand being told what to do. So for me, it's like, I'll find my own way. You don't need to tell me how to get there. Tell me it is what I'm looking for and I'll find a way to get there. You know, someday put this on the back burner for another show sometime, but can we discuss alternative art forms and arts and crafts and like the differences between high art and, you know, like all of that kind of stuff?
Well, we're kind of talking alongside all of this about those.
I know. I just figured someday we should get like dive deep into that.
It's a very contentious area.
Yeah.
You yourself in the past have told me off for describing my work as fine art photography.
I have.
You have.
What did I say?
You have explained to me before that photography is art, so I don't need to label it as such.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that I would have said that.
Yeah. And I reflected on that and I realized that's the same.
You're incredibly wrong, Bill.
No, not at all. That you're incredibly right. That I do not need to justify photography as art. Likewise, when we talk about art and craft, there's an immediate sense of diminishment in the word craft.
Yes.
An artist might be seen as being higher than being an artisan. Goodness knows why. I have no idea why.
But I think that there are plenty of what we would call artists whose art is only good because they have extremely good craft as well. You know what I mean?
Well,
I mean, I guess that it's the definition of craft that gets tricky. But there is this idea that, you know, if somebody has extraordinary skills, and that has a lot to do with the way that they make what they make. You know, early Chuck Close paintings, you know, the photorealistic stuff, not everybody can do that stuff. So that requires a very high level of craft that he elevates to the level to where it is then art. But that doesn't mean everybody who, like, you know, is making a box out of wood is an artist. He could just be a very good craftsman. You know what I mean? I don't know. I fight with this all the time because, sorry, one last thing. I am right that in the sense that your photographs don't need to be labeled as fine art. But at the same time, the flip side is if everything is art, then nothing is. You know, it's like the old thing on The Incredibles, right? You know, everybody's special. Well, that's just another way of saying that nobody is.
Well, you've said that before several times, Bill, and I know
because it's a great line.
You do like to trundle out The Incredibles. However,
it's a cartoon.
Craft is embedded. It's not separate to art. So craft, in my understanding, is embedded and implicit in art. Now, yes, but I know that.
But is art implicit in craft? I guess is my question. You know what I mean? I think there are plenty of. You know, I think you need to have craft in order to make art, but I don't need that you need to be an artist in order to have craft.
I mean, let's look at this, right? So here are two people who both were teachers.
Yep.
Who both in their own way were they were pioneers.
One who's working in a medium that's considered high art and one that's working in a medium that may or may not be considered high art.
Yes. I mean, Josef Albers, when Black Mountain College closed in 1957, he went off and taught at Yale, right?
Yep.
Women's work.
Yep.
High concept. It's actually not high concept, it's color theory. I mean, this is taking stuff that is already hundreds of years old and known about.
I agree. Why should one be considered higher than the other? And
that's not the topic, but to think about what we are talking about to do with learning, both of these people as teachers
Yep.
Almost like hierarchies of value in teaching.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I was about to say the same thing. Like, who do the students have more respect for in some way? But you're also talking about 70 years ago and a woman and a man. Those are like, also, there's the stupid gender stuff that would be going on.
But we're talking also actually really about Black Mountain College. And
Yeah.
Black Mountain College was very progressive. You know, I was reading testimonials just the other day from young women who were there talking. I mean, if you go onto the Black Mountain College website and look in their archives, there's lots of transcripts of young women who said things like, you know, you were encouraged to wear old clothes, to have a sex life, to know yourself.
Yeah.
Not to become a number or become sort of subsumed into a generality.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, through being an individual, one also became a very vital part of a community. And within that community, they learned together. Now, that's a fascinating thing. It's quite a subtle thing to say that one is an individual, yet one is also part of essentially a communal activity.
Yeah. We all need to be unique, but we also become one of many. They are a collection of people who were at Black Mountain College, which is in itself an insular thing that is an identity away from everybody else in the world.
Yeah.
That thing's cool, by the way, the thing they're playing with.
Teachers have a really interesting role, I think, in that teachers are not who we think they are. Like, I'm a teacher, right? I go to school and I'm a teacher. I'm Ms. Robertson.
But do they see you as an individual person, or do they see you as Ms. Robertson, the person who apparates and shows up in the morning and leaves at night and doesn't have a real life outside of work?
No, I mean, I think that that's another conversation for another time.
Yeah.
But I'm very aware that I have the title teacher, but that I'm also a learner, and that there are many people who are teachers to me that don't have the title, of course. I mean, we've all had teachers in our parents, we've all had teachers in our friends, we've all had teachers in our acquaintances, and the people that got nothing to do whatsoever with what we think of as school, or again, this idea of institutionalized learning. We learn things often from people that aren't masterful.
Sure.
I was listening to Ido Portal the other day talking in an interview from quite a few years ago now with one of, is a famous, I think, maybe football player.
You're asking me, okay.
Anyway, he was talking about this notion that, isn't it fascinating that we expect people to learn, but we don't tell people how to be students. And equally, that there is no such thing as a master. So teaching, the role, the title, puts you in a false position of mastery. Like, have I mastered everything that I teach? No, I'm still learning.
Yep.
By the way, I hope it's okay to say it and sound not too conceited, but I think that's actually probably what makes me a better teacher.
Did you have respect for teachers when you were younger? Do you have more respect now for teachers when you are a teacher? And should all students have respect for all teachers? Because there's a lot of teachers who are crap at what they do.
It's a very difficult question to answer. I have a lot of colleagues now who have the role title teacher, who I have utmost respect for, because I see how hard they work and how much they care. And I also see their endeavor to continue to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I have encountered others over many years of teaching in different settings who have not cared to learn themselves.
Did they care to teach even? That's the other question.
But the teaching they seemed to do was closed. This idea, it was closed. It was like, let's get to 2 with the 1 + 1.
Yeah, here's what I need to teach you, and I'm going to teach the next year the same exact thing.
It's not even that. Again, I come back to the word inquiry, Bill. It's that there's nothing open-ended. Maybe you might say to me, well, there isn't anything open-ended about 1 + 1.
Well, if you ask, Charles Pfefferman, yes, that's true.
Right, but there's a certain magic in learning, isn't there?
Do you think the job of a teacher is to actually impart information, or to prosper inquiry?
Well,
or
I'm
both?
definitely in the, I don't like being so categoric, as you know, but I am definitely in that second camp.
Do you think there's any part of the first half that is necessary, or do you think?
There's a sense that, someone's going to ask me a question. It's probably appropriate that I have some idea of the answer in context of my subject. But if I don't know, it's okay not to know, and then I will learn it. I will acquire the information. I'll go and find out, and I'll help my student find out as well. But I will look at that even as a thing in itself. Like, I was asked a question, I did not know the answer. There's so many layers of learning in that as an experience even. Now, I don't want to get too dippy-hippy about this, but when we're really watching our thoughts and understanding how we meet information, do we just accept information, take it, use it as ours to the relationship we have with our memory? Do we understand how to apply it? Are we part of process? Or can
Who's to say there's right and wrong in any of that?
Or can we go beyond that even further and accept information on one level and keep asking after it? I don't think many people do that. It doesn't mean you're caught in a perpetual loop of why. But actually, if you were, that's quite a good loop to be in. To keep looking, to keep asking, not because you're insanely dissatisfied with life or anything like that, but that there's an understanding that there's more to everything.
Listen, I would tend to agree with you on all of this. There is a nagging part of me that wonders whether you and I, to some extent, don't give most people enough credit, and that they are doing all of this stuff. They're not just, they may not be doing it in the way that we'd like them to, or the depth at which we expect them to.
I'm not discrediting anyone.
No, I'm saying, I wonder if, no, I don't mean that like that. What I mean is, I wonder if is there any other option, or is all of this exactly how it always works? Just living every day is going to have that process of inquiry. Yeah, I don't know if I buy that, but okay. Because that plays sort of like the wise idiot card. You know what I mean? That there's something wrong, that ignorance is somehow is virtuous. And I don't think that it is.
So
I think knowledge is far more virtuous than ignorance.
So knowledge is virtue.
Yeah.
Information.
But that is a very Enlightenment sort of thinking, right? Absolutely it is.
You're not one to usually care about Enlightenment thinking,
No, but I mean, it's a reality of the Western world of the last 500 years, which, for all its faults, also has a lot of advantages. I mean, but I understand what they're getting at.
Mm-hmm. You understand what they're getting at.
Well, I mean, you like the idea that there is some sort of intuitive wisdom or
Do I
knowledge that
know?
if you
Have you asked me?
well, no, I'm guessing. This is my theory that you believe that if you just, and by you just, you mean me just, quiet down enough and listen instead of speak, that come forth from the froth will be depth of thought.
Well, what is intelligence?
The ability to process and, what is the word I'm looking for? I just had it in my head and I lost it. And this is why I am not intelligent today. And synthesize new information from given information.
So intelligence is only related to information.
Well, you're going to go down to like emotional intelligence.
You're being very linear.
To me, yeah, I mean, I'm a very meat and potatoes kind of thinker. I think that the best way to get something done is to do it, not to think about it.
You've spent over 100 hours talking to me about all kinds of art.
Has it really been 100 episodes?
No, but you did tell me the other day that we'd spent over 100 hours talking.
Oh, I just guessing, but sure, it probably, you know.
Well, we've done a lot of these, right?
Yes, we've done a lot of these.
And in that time, have you learned anything?
Yes, but I think that the things that I've learned, I mean, I better understand how your brain works. And I think you more frustrated about how mine works. I think the things that I've learned though are the I think the places that you and I have gone where our two ways of thinking have collided have produced ideas that I didn't have before. So do you think differently at all because of the time you spent talking to me?
Can I ask another?
No. Sure.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
By the way, I do think that my sense of everything has deepened. So I'm open to that change. But in one sense, that's not really change. That's been about, again, going into something very carefully. Like we've gone into topics that's around art and culture.
Sure.
And I've learned so much through doing that. And I've been with you whilst that's happened. And where you like to talk about our separateness, I see as often as actually being very much together.
Sure.
Because we're together in the inquiry.
Right. We're on a journey.
I don't know if
we are not the people that we were when we did our first episode. And I think we are better for it.
Well, again, I'm not quite.
You don't like the better. We're different for it. I think we're better for it. I think that we've have disseminated information in both directions. See, change for change's sake doesn't make much sense for me.
But active learning,
sure,
would suggest that we want to make change. Again,
Sure.
the way that I think a lot of people think of learning is that it's a direction to over there.
It's progressive.
Sometimes I wonder, learning, deep learning, is from the center.
Mhm.
It's not from here to over there. It's I'm losing my words now. It's very important to me, this, actually. I realize it. Not just because my day job is a teacher, but I look at how I understand the world and how I've learned what I know. And if I believe what I know, who's given me that knowledge? Where has it come from? And when I think about everything I've ever learned has come from somewhere, I do truthfully find that quite
Wait, it's come from somewhere internally, do you mean?
no, no.
What were you trying to say?
Well, I'm getting there, Bill.
Okay.
I feel that if I've been told everything I know,
Yeah.
then there's nothing of me in that. And so when I wonder, have I ever had an insight, which is actually not about me at all, but is about something universal, connected to everything. There's comfort in believing oneself to have had an insight, but the insight doesn't keep happening for me, at least successively through all time. Although what occurred through the insight does stay, but only as a resonance. And this is where I put value onto experience, I suppose. And it makes me feel a bit sad because then it's gone.
No, but I think that there's artifacts, there's residue of any experience that stays. But I also think that, like, even if all of your information is coming externally, we're not all getting the same sets of information, and not all the same information sticks. So, there is something to be said that, like, you are the unique individual that you are because of the set of information that your brain has chosen to keep,
Yeah.
and organize and settle. And if there's insight that comes from that, that is insight that's unique to you, whether or not it's coming from inside of you.
This all links also into what is truth? Where does it come from?
Sure.
Right. Anyway, we're going to finish now, but I do want one last question.
Sure.
Are we all teachers?
Yes. Because there's always someone who hasn't had the experience we've had. I think I've learned from almost everyone I've ever talked to, and I talk to a lot of people. I find the fact that the information that comes from other people that becomes part of me, where that feels vampiric perhaps to you, I find that very comforting, that I am this amalgamation of all the experiences I've had with other people, because experiences without other people are not nearly as meaningful as experiences with other people.
It seems so human-centered, though, doesn't it?
Well, we're humans.
I'm a human, of course, but
sure.
Do I only learn from others? Again, this idea, as you said, external source. Do I only learn from people even?
Where else do you want to learn from? Animals, or like some supernatural stuff? Which direction are you going? Up or down the the complexity scale?
What do I arrive with already? What do I learn from a center that is not me, the I? What do I know that's not affected by my ego?
Nothing.
For example.
In my opinion, nothing. But then again, you know, I'm the non-woo atheist over here.
And ladies and gentlemen, that is just to put us into the final compartment for this evening.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That was a fun one, Sandi.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.